Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I'm talking about watches. Well, I am rather excited again. Yes, I know I do get excited, especially when I talk about watches, but today I'm doing a full in-depth review of my first Zelos watch. The Zelos Aurora TI Field Teal 42mm. Yes, I was able to remember that. That is fantastic. So yes, it's a long name, but for me, it's not about the name. It's not even about the hype behind Zelos. For me, this particular watch is all about that dial because it is something rather special. But is it worthwhile buying one of these watches? Is it worth buying a Zelos watch? Is the hype that is online all over the place about Zelos actually worthwhile? Well, I'm not going to be able to tell you as a company as a whole. I've only had access to this one particular watch, and I do hope in this one particular watch review that I'm able to give you some insights into sort of the quality of the watches, what you get for your money, and the sort of interesting details that they offer. So let's flip the camera around now and let's do the full in-depth review of my first Zelos. Well, my first Zelos watch, my first watch from them, which I've been wanting to own one for such a long time, and it's time for the full review of this one. Has it sort of stood up to all the hype? Is it as good as I was hoping it would be? Well, let's talk about it, shall we? Because first of all, packaging, stunning. Much better than almost every packaging that I've ever had. It is aluminium, it feels solid, nice deep insert there with the Zelos symbol. Very cool, and I like that it's quite flat as well, so it fits into my sort of watch drawer that I put all my boxes into. Comes obviously being able to put some more watches in, which is really cool. We do have a nice metal warranty card, which is filled out, which is exactly what we do want. It only comes with 1 year warranty, I believe, these guys. I know we do tend to complain about that a little bit, but I think with the quality of this watch, we're not really going to have too many issues. And whilst we're here, have a look at how many sort of leftover links that I have. Now, I have a medium 6 3/4 inch wrist, so I think you're going to be able to have a rather large wrist to be able to fit this one. So there's a good amount of links available to us. Now, on paper, this watch has a lot going for it. Firstly, it has a lot of positivity being pushed behind the brand because people love it so much, but it also contains a great high beat 9039 Newton movement, 200 meters of water resistance, great lume, sapphire crystal. It comes on a fully titanium bracelet, fully titanium case, all for $529 US. So on paper, lots of positive things there, lots of things saying that, wow, this is a magical watch for a reasonable price. But does that actually translate into real life? Well, let's jump into it and let's have a proper, really good look at this watch. The thing that really stands out and continually grabs my attention, and it has to, is that dial. It is truly incredible. Really, it can't really translate into photos. It doesn't seem to translate onto video very well. I will capture it the best that I can. But let me just point out a few things that perhaps may not be sort of being shown properly on camera. Firstly, there is that transition in color, and I think you can see that on camera, but I don't think the depth of the 3D effect of the dial really translate. Because as you can see, there is sort of these scallops being taken out of it. You can see when you look at it at different angles, you can see those sort of indents, sort of that 3D effect to it. But then there's also a 3D sort of circular pattern sort of built into that as well, which helps with that light play. And I hope you can probably see it. See there? Let's zoom in on that little bit there. I'll zoom in on camera now. See the sort of the striations through there. That continues all the way around, and that really helps with the light play. Obviously, also helping with that light play is the colors that are used. That sort of teal color, that blue color, very iridescent, really does shine. This is a watch that you want to be outside with because that dial just blows up in your face. It sparkles, it shines, it captures your attention. But obviously that dial is just the first part of this watch. There's a lot more going on, and there's even more going on with the dial. Let's check out those indices, because at the 12, 3, 6, and 9 we have applied indices. They do stick up fairly sort of significantly, so there's a bit more of a 3D effect to it. Lots of depth play going on with this watch, which is something that I do rather like about it. The other hour tracks here at the 1, 2, and etc. are all cut into the dial, so we have almost like a sandwich dial there. there. This sort of iridescent part of the dial with those applied markers are now sat on top of the dial, giving us that sort of depth in regards to those indices, but also depth in regards to the outside of the chapter ring. We can see printed on there, we have some numbers and dots. That's on a lower level because this is applied on top. So we're getting some different depths going on. Depths in regards to what we're seeing, what we're feeling, and everything that's coming through with this dial. A real nice sort of play with 3D textures. And that is a real big plus for this watch. And I really like that texture sort of play on this sort of watch. Now, what else have we got going on? Because there's some other sort of features that help with that light play or don't detract from that light play. And that is sort of, let's check out those sort of hands, those skeletonized hands. Those skeletonized hands are not brushed, they're not polished. They are actually sort of painted black, but it's like a black polish, which is very cool. It sort of means it doesn't sort of detract from that dial so much. The same thing is on the indices, like a polished black, which doesn't really help too much with the legibility, unfortunately. But I think this watch is more about the beauty of it rather than so much about the specific legibility. We do then have nice little pop of color with that orange sort of second hand. Fairly nice and long hands. I quite like when it touches the outside there. You can see that second hand is touching that minute track there. Minute hand is pushing quite far out, even though it's not completely obvious, because as it's black and it transitions into that black dial, it starts to sort of fade away, which I think almost makes this watch a piece of artwork beyond it actually being a watch. And something that really stands out when you turn the lights off is the loom. So let's check out the loom now, because Zelos watches are really well known for good loom. And this one certainly has not disappointed me in regards to that loom. And I'll be honest, I could probably talk all day and all throughout this review just about this dial, but there's a lot more going on here and we need to know a little bit more about it in regards to the dimensions as well as everything else. So let's talk about the size of this watch, because I went for the largest size, the 42mm diameter one. There's a smaller version of it. I really went back and forth between the two. I decided to go with the larger version in this instance, obviously. So let's talk about the dimensions. We're looking at a 42mm case diameter. It is 12.4mm thick. The lug to lug is 48.9. But as you can see, even though it sort of has female end links, it does sort of grab there. You can't really pull it down any further. So it does end up having a slightly effective lug to lug there of 52mm. 22mm lug width, and on this supplied bracelet, being all titanium, so that does obviously affect the weight, it is 140 grams. It absolutely does have a flat piece of sapphire crystal there, and there is a plenty of AR coating there, certainly letting you see through. So you can see there the light is actually playing with the dial there, but you can absolutely see straight through and see those hands. This contains the Miyota 9039 high beat movement, no ghost date position. It also has a 200 meters of water resistance, and that is obtained through this screw down crown. So let's just go through that. Yep, screw down, we've got a threaded crown there, hand winding, very smooth action, this Miyota movement, very smooth, very, very nice. And of course, we have hacking. Whilst we're talking about this Miyota movement, let's throw it on the time grapher and see how it is performing. Well, there's absolutely no complaints from me about that set of figures. We've got a high beat, 28,800 vibrations. We've got virtually no beat error. Amplitude's a tiny little bit low, but it's okay. And it's sitting plus or minus about 1 to 2 seconds, quite often sitting around about 0. Well, that's a good set of figures. And that is something that is really starting to sort of show me about these sort of high beat Miyota movements. I'm starting to get a few more into my collection. I'm noticing obviously that microbrands like this are using these movements. I'm really starting to sort of appreciate them because they are sort of a well-known, sort of well-established brand, being Miyota. They are high beat, they are reliable, they seem to be performing very well. Every single one that I've had is performing very, very well. And yeah, I'm really appreciating it. Thank you, Miyota. Thank you, Zelos, for using the Miyota movement. Now, the whole watch is titanium, so we've got a titanium bezel, titanium case, titanium bracelet. I think I'm pretty sure it's a titanium clasp as well. Being titanium and being a field watch, or trying to be a field watch, or being called a field watch, they've gone for all brushed. Every surface, every side, every angle is brushed. Now, that does mean that for me, it does sort of two sort of things. Firstly, it kind of fits in with that field watch aesthetic that they're trying to go with. But what it also does is it allows there being a real contrast between a sort of more of a, I guess, almost dull sort of looking sort of bracelet to a real iridescent dial. That contrast really helps to then push that dial through to you as well. But let's talk about the quality of the bracelet and the fit and finish, because it's very, very good. We have sort of brushing everywhere, as I've mentioned. Solid end end links which fit perfectly. Really nice bracelet, really works really well, very, very soft, very nice on the hands, very nice on the fingers, very nice on wrist as well. That screw down crown has a fully loomed Zelos, as you would have seen in that loom, which is very cool. We do have screw links, and we've got this awesome clasp. Now, I have some positives and some negative things to say about the clasp. From a positive perspective, I think it's awesome. I think it's well made. I think it works very well. It's very easy to use, double pusher, all milled, very nice size, doesn't sort of outweigh the watch, looks quite good. Has this really cool on the fly push button. You push it and it moves back and forth, which is great. However, for me, it slightly didn't work because, as you can see, I've actually used some of that sort of on the fly adjustment to get the correct fit. I could not find a correct fit without having it sitting out like that. So it's a little bit disappointing not to be able to have that sort of sitting inside the clasp. So really I may have needed maybe a half link, or maybe just needed that to be moved back in a little bit disappointing. I don't particularly like seeing that when I turn my wrist over. However, being underneath my wrist, not the dial of the wrist, it's not something that I am concentrating or looking at all the time. On the back of the watch, we have a very, very cool, nice 3D effect case back. That is the sailing yacht Aurora, which is this watch's name, which is why it has been called the Aurora after this particular ship. You'll also see, if we look at the end links there, they are quick release. So that's a very functional way of switching out to other sorts of straps if that's what you want to do. And on wrist, it feels very nice, has a nice weight to it, and I think it sits actually quite well. I do quite like a slightly larger watch. I'm not sure if I did pick the right size. I think the 38 would look great as well, but I can almost guarantee that if I'd got the 38, I would have maybe said maybe I should have got the big one. So I think perhaps for me personally, and it's nothing against Zelos, I just think a 40mm would have been the perfect ideal sweet spot for me. However, I am actually happy with this. I do think it fits my wrist nicely. If it's okay, I'm okay with it. I'm enjoying wearing it. I have a 6 3/4 inch wrist for your reference. Certainly does fit down quite nicely onto my wrist. Now, what do I like about it? What don't I like? And what would I change? Well, before I actually jump straight into that, I just want to explain to you why I do this like, dislike, change section into the videos. This is not me saying I love this, I hate that, wish they changed that. That's not specifically why I do this part of the review. Why I do this is to get down into the nitty gritty, really point out the tiny little features that really stand out as positives, that possibly could be seen as negatives, and things that perhaps that if you had this on Rich, you might be thinking about what you would prefer to have changed on the watch, or perhaps what you might want to start sort of steering towards different watches that perhaps have those features. Because when I'm watching reviews on watches, quite often it's because I'm interested in buying one and I haven't been able to get it on wrist, so I'm buying it blind. So I want to watch these reviews. I want to see all these little things pointed out. Not me being overly positive about watch, not me being overly negative about a watch. It's just pointing out all these things. So keep that in mind, because I'm going to point out a few things that probably can be perceived as negative, and I'm not being negative about this watch or this brand. I like this watch, I like this brand, but if you're thinking about buying one, you're not going to be able to get one on wrist before you buy one. So I really want to get down into the nitty gritty so you can have a fully informed decision if you decide to buy this one. The things that I like are fairly obvious, because there are some really obvious things to like. That iridescent dial is magical. It really is. It really, really plays the light. It is a gorgeous thing to see. What you don't obviously see on pictures and things is the 3D effect to it, both with the dial itself, but as well as those indices coming up and then going down, and then the sort of backdrop in regards to that inner chapter ring. That 3D effect really adds and sort of builds to that whole look of the watch. The quality is obviously fantastic. It's exactly what I was hoping for from Zelos, exactly what I was expecting, since a lot of people talk so much about it. The loom is incredible, exactly what I expected. Again, I love that 3D case back. Very, very cool. And value for money, the price of this one, with what you're getting for this watch, both the looks, the individual style of it, the quality and fit and finish of the case, the bezel, everything around it, the bracelet, and that nice high beat movement, is outstanding. It really is hard to find anything else in this sort of price range that is going to rival this one. And if it does, well, it's likely to be another micro brand doing something just as good. But it's not all daisies and butterflies. It's not all perfect, this watch, and there are a few things that are worthwhile pointing out, and try to sort of keep in mind that I'm not being negative about it. I want to point it out, and I partly want to do this because I want you to be informed, but I'm also partly want to do this because there is so much positivity about Zelos out there online that perhaps people are getting a little bit caught up in that positivity. I think there's very good reasons for that positivity, but it's not all perfect. This is not a perfect watch, and there are some things that are worth pointing out about it. The first one is, and it's been pointed out to me by a couple of viewers as well, is as a package, does it all actually fit together? Because I'm not 100% convinced. That dial is stunning, but the contrast with this sort of style of bracelet, this sort of finishing, this sort of case, it is a little bit jarring. I think, as I said, it does mean that this pops more, which I think perhaps is partly why he's done this, but I'm not 100% convinced if it actually works. There is such a difference between a sort of fairly matte, fairly dull sort of looking surround and such an iridescent dial. I think perhaps he's trying to go for that sort of pop feature, meld the back into the background, have that dial jump out, but it does feel a little bit disjointed. It doesn't stop me liking it, but it is worthwhile pointing that one out, because when you do get it in hand, I think there are people going to pick this one up and go, oh, that kind of doesn't feel like it suits that watch. The clasp, as mentioned, a little bit disappointing. I really don't like having to have used that sort of on-the-fly adjustment to actually make the watch fit. And this is the only watch I've ever had that I have not been able to get a perfect fit. So perhaps that's probably lucky in regards to me, really. Most watches do fit me. Unfortunately, this one doesn't fit me. Doesn't take away from the wearing of this watch, obviously. I'm not staring at that, but it's worth pointing out because other people may have that same issue. So what would I change? Well, there's a few things. I think the case and the bracelet needs a little bit of something. Tiny little bit of polishing along the edge, maybe a little bit of a chamfered edge there, maybe a little bit of brushing maybe on the inside edge of those links, something to sort of join them together, to stop feeling them so separate. Perhaps that might actually sort of make it feel more like a cohesive unit. Also, many people have mentioned to me that well, they're calling this a field watch. Is it a field watch? Well, no, it's not really a field watch, is it? You know, it's sort of a field-inspired watch. You know, realistically, you could call this the Zelos banana. It doesn't look like a banana, but it doesn't really matter what you call it. It's up to the manufacturer. They're deciding to call this the Aurora because they're calling it after a boat. They're calling it a field watch. That's perfectly fine. That doesn't bother me at all. But if you are looking for a field watch, specifically, this is probably not what you're actually after. This is something a little bit different. And legibility, let's check out that legibility. Well, it's not particularly legible, and that really doesn't seem to fit into field watch either. I think one of the aspects of field watches is that meant to be overly sort of legible. This one doesn't have that. That doesn't bother me again. I just like having the beautiful sort of almost artwork dial there. And there's something that I do think about when I see this watch. I sort of see that dial and think, oh, let's blow that up and stick that on the wall. It would look absolutely gorgeous. But let's flip back to me now and let me give you some further final thoughts about what I think about this brand, what I think about this watch, and how pleased I am with actually this purchase. Let's flip back to me now. So my first Zelos, am I completely satisfied? Well, mostly. It is absolutely an amazing watch. It is a beautiful looking watch. I love the dial, and I think Zelos is well and truly known for doing amazing dials. And that is something that I think really helps to hype the watches up and why so many people are so dedicated to buy this particular brand. But are they perfect? Well, no. There are a few little issues along the way that I've noticed with this watch. Nothing that would stop me buying it, nothing that would stop me recommending it to people, but it is absolutely worthwhile knowing that even though there is a huge amount of positivity about the brand, that they're not perfect. But then no watch brand is perfect, so please don't let any negativity or anything that I've said about this watch that I perhaps have picked or nicked at put you off buying a Zelos watch. What it has done for me though, it has taught me a lesson. It has taught me that I don't particularly love titanium watches. I don't have anything against titanium watches, but this one here is the first fully titanium watch I've ever owned. And I've realized from my own personal sort of journey in watches, having this one on the wrist, I prefer steel. There's nothing against titanium, it's nothing against the look, it's nothing against the feel, but I have now learnt that I actually prefer stainless steel. And I'm so glad that I have had this experience and learnt this lesson, because it's not going to stop me enjoying this watch, but it is going to affect how I buy watches in the future. Now guys, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you haven't clicked on that little subscribe button by now, well, I really do hope that you perhaps click on it right now. Thank you so much. And I do hope to see you in the next video.